Welcome to this series on the core consciousness of Christ. My name is Paul Evans. I've been a student of Scripture and spirituality for almost half a century, which just seems to be insane. Now, right out of the gate, I want to let you know I'm not a scholar. I am a student. And so what I love sharing is things that are just simple aspects of life that seem to help me navigate, and maybe they'll help you navigate as well. So when we're thinking about consciousness overall, we're thinking about awareness, right? We're thinking about being in tune, maybe being a little bit intuitive, but we have clarity, we're conscious, we're awake, we are aware, all of those sorts of things. And I was looking it up to see what just some of the concepts were. And self-awareness, present moment awareness, expanded perception, non-attachment, compassion, and empathy. We're talking about living at what some would say is an elevated level, an expanded level. That we're not simply living day to day in this just biosphere and just trying to make it through somehow. We're living with some hope and some expectation, some belief that collectively that everything in the spiritual world is good and working toward our benefit if we are awake and aware. Now, certainly when it comes to the Christ, people will often look to him as the guide, or at least a guide. Even folks who don't believe in God at all will say, well, this person named Christ or named Jesus, when he walked the earth, it seemed like he had it together fairly well. And so it might be good to pick up some pointers from him. And that's what we'll be looking at as well. So when I was thinking about Christ consciousness, some of the key concepts that came up were universal love and compassion, unity with the divine, transcendence of ego. Almost all of us wrestle with that. Expanded awareness and spiritual insight, and a sense of oneness with all of creation. So for this series, and really for future teachings, it's going to be bound up in that type of consciousness. And what better place to begin really than what's labeled the Sermon on the Mount, as Jesus climbed the mount with his disciples. And really this is the core of his teaching. Well, we're certainly going to walk through it in the future, different encounters and different stories and different events and different locations and their meaning behind a lot of those. But for now, let's just begin with his core teaching, what he was really sharing with those who followed him so that they would end up with his mindset, with his mind, with his lens. They would begin looking at life through that lens. They would begin looking at people through that lens. They would begin to process situations with his mind instead of simply their own biological mind that tends to not transcend ego, tends to be a lot more about us. And so as we begin with the Beatitudes, well, we're going to get to the Beatitudes. When we begin with the Sermon on the Mount, that's Matthew 5 through 7. If you have a Bible, you can follow along with that. And you can look it up later if you want to. And the great thing about today is you can look it up on your phone, you can look it up on your computer, and it's all right there. But the story actually begins in Matthew 4. So Matthew 4 is when this actually begins. And let's look back at verse 23. It says Jesus went through Galilee teaching in their synagogue. So we often think about the Christ and think about the miracles, which he does here. We think about him feeding people, which he does. But we often forget that a big part of his work was teaching. In fact, there's one scene when it says he saw the large crowds and he had compassion on them. And so he taught them. We would have thought that he healed them or he fed them, which he did later. But when he saw them and he had compassion, he taught them because he knew that this knowledge, this consciousness, if it was adopted, then so many of the issues in life just seem to dissolve. So verse 25, large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. Let me hit those one more time. This is important. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. This was a very, very diverse group of people. And what Jesus is going to teach right out of the gate is the collective. He's going to be teaching a connection with everybody. technically with everything. But we're not wired that way, and his people weren't wired that way at all either. So now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. This is so funny too, because so many of us spent so much of our life trying not to be taught. Man, in high school, I hated school. I had a couple of teachers I liked, and I loved my friends. That was just the blast. But as far as going there to learn, that was not really what was in my brain. I was not there to be educated. I was there to have a good time. So often when we see teaching, there's a little bit of this reluctance. Don't tell me how to live my life. Don't you dare try to give me some instruction unless I want it, unless I ask for it. But he began to teach them, and they did ask for it in a way because they were following him. So they're saying, I want to become like you. So he saw these crowds, and these crowds did not get along. The group that was at the bottom of the mountain, they didn't get along. They were from different areas. The funniest one is the Decapolis, because it was across the Sea of Galilee. And it would be the place, like growing up, if your mom or dad said, I better not catch you with so-and-so. That was the Decapolis. They were pagan. They did not follow the religious teachings of that day. And so it was a big deal that the Decapolis was even there. Then the Judeans, the Galileans, they didn't always get along. Sometimes, if one of their names were mentioned as a group, somebody might spit to show their dissatisfaction with that particular cultural and people group. And so when Jesus begins to teach, he teaches what we call the Beatitudes. And what we often feel like with the Beatitudes is this is how we're supposed to be. We almost always read ourselves into Scripture and think that he's talking to us. And in a way he is, but I get tickled at our non-transcendence of ego. Oh, look at this, the blessings, the Beatitudes. Look at all this stuff I get. It's not what he's doing. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Who's he talking about? He's not talking about the disciples, because he's not saying you. He's saying those. Those who? Those people at the bottom of the mountain. That diverse group. That collective. That some people would look down and say, okay, those people are definitely in. Those people are definitely out. Nope. Christ says, those people among that crowd, you're looking at it as a group of people that you want to write off. Among that crowd of people, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who don't think they're rich spiritually, but they know that they continue to need guidance spiritually. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In other words, the kingdom of heaven shows up inside of them. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Who are these mourners? Am I supposed to go around sad all the time? What's going on? Is this why so many believers in God look miserable? Are they mourning? It means a concern for all of humanity, and get this, for all of the earth. They'll be comforted because there's going to be a change. There's going to be a shift. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek. What's meekness? It is strength under control. Instead of taking my strength and exerting this pressure and this authority on somebody else, instead I'm meek. I know that I've got certain rights to do certain things, but I'm willing to push those out of the way for the greatest good. They'll inherit the earth. Why do they inherit it? Inheritance usually is because you're in a family or because you could be trusted. And I think we've all seen people who thought they were in somebody's will, thought they were going to get the inheritance, and they didn't. Why? Because the person in the lead, the person who died, thought they couldn't be trusted with it or didn't like them while they were alive. Why? Probably because they did not show meekness. They'll inherit the earth. They can be trusted with it. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They will be filled. They hunger and thirst for it. They desire it. Why are you watching this video? Trying to figure out if there's something here that might help you. Why do I study these things? Because I'm trying to figure out if there's a way for me to live more in alignment, more in awareness, more in consciousness. So I hunger and thirst for this. And we're just covering these fast. Maybe later in the series, we'll go deeper into these. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. so that we are actually living out the type of attributes that we're wanting to receive. It's always amazing when there's so many people who are harsh and they're mean and they're unkind, and somebody becomes unkind to them, and what's the first thing they do? They just can't believe it. They have a huge drama fest. How dare they say that to me? And you want to go, what goes around comes around? You know that's you, right? You know that's your... But those who are merciful, they receive that mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. We often get into the future. They will see God. People often interpret this, one day I'll see God. One day when I get to heaven, oh, thank goodness, this pure in heart business is going to give me access in the future when I die. This is present tense. They will see God. When our hearts are pure, when we're in alignment, we start seeing God everywhere. We see him in the trees and the mountains. We hear him in the wind. We feel God inside of us. The pure in heart see God everywhere. Blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called children of God. The peacemakers, see, they've got to create peace. It's not natural in our society. Often it's not natural with us. We're going out with the mindset to create it. And he's saying, and this crowd over here, and this crowd down at the bottom of the mountain, and the ones who don't, it seems like that particular group is not peacemakers at all. In that group, the person who is the peacemaker, guess what? They'll be called the children of God. Why? Because God, he's saying the consciousness of God is peace. It's not wrath. It's not getting on to somebody. It's not catching somebody. It's not being hard. It's peace. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Persecuted because of righteousness. Have you ever lived in a right way or made a right decision and somebody got onto you for it? Or they made fun of you for it? Somebody's gossiping and you walk away and they're like, well, why'd you walk away? I just didn't want to be part of the conversation. Oh, do you think you're better than everybody else? That in a way is persecution. Often we think about persecution is for religious beliefs and somebody's life is on the line. Certainly it includes that. But it also includes that when somebody stands up for righteousness. So in that crowd, if somebody said something about the Decapolis and somebody else from Galilee said, whoa, wait a minute, God made them too. They would have gotten blasted because of that. So standing up for rightness, says theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They're going to experience what heaven is like, even immediately, because they're standing for the right thing. And it's not just standing up for the right thing, it's standing up for it in the right way. Then it says, blessed are you. Now he's talking to the disciples. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil things against you because of me. In other words, when you get this consciousness, when you start living this out, it's because of me. Your life is changing because you're adopting some of these principles. Your life is changing because you're beginning to live and act and speak differently because you're conscious and you're aware. And guess what? People are going to say stuff about you. They're going to talk about you. And he's telling his people that. So if we begin with this mindset and we get into this consciousness, don't be shocked. Don't be shocked if some people are bothered by that, or people think you're trying to become too good. You're not trying to become too good. You're simply trying to become who you are. All of this is already inside of us. God is already inside of us. Christ's mind is already within us. Spirit dwells inside of us. But we've got so many blocks that it's hard to allow that consciousness to become the consciousness. He said, rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Rejoice and be glad. This is not typically us. This is not where our brain tends to go. I'm going to rejoice and be glad because stuff went wrong and people are talking about me. This consciousness says that's not even about me. It's just about them. And I can expect some blowback. It's not that they're going to stone us, not at least where I live anyway, maybe in some other cultures. But it means that there is going to be some negativity, and there is going to be some talking, and there is going to be some gossip, and there is going to be some teasing and possibly some bullying, because you're going to change consciousness. And the temptation is this. The temptation is to say, and I don't mean temptation in a negative way, the desire is, I'm leaving all those people. People today will always say, get away from all toxic people and just surround yourself with positive people or conscious people. That sounds good. It sounds good. But how can the unconscious become conscious if we're not out there living this awareness in a way that, yep, let's say that 9 out of 10 people really come against us. But that one who goes, okay, you've got this unusual level of peace. I mean, it's pretty weird. You've got this unusual level of joy regardless of the circumstances. You've got this unusual way of loving people who I don't think deserve to be loved. And so you end up changing somebody from toxic to maybe pure in heart because of this consciousness. So this is a challenging passage for me right out of the gate, when Jesus is basically saying, hey, all of those people, blessings, 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 which technically means favor, 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 favor. Even among those people who you think don't count, even among those people that you wish weren't part of the crowd. They're all one. There is a collective consciousness throughout the world, throughout the universe, in which we are one, and yet we so often separate, and we so often see diversity. It's wild. Next time we're going to talk about being salt and light, which is pretty exciting, especially the light part. I'm pretty pumped up about that. So make sure you get notified. Subscribe to this channel and click the bell so that you get every single notification when a video comes out. And we're going to be stepping through the entire Sermon on the Mount. But don't forget, you are part of the collective. And there's so many blessings that come into our life, so much favor that comes into our life, so much attraction of good things that comes into our life when we are conscious that we are part of the collective. See you next time, and be blessed.